We've got 37 companies that announced raises in their dividends in the last week, and we're going to start right here with Albany, and they're raising their dividend by 19%, giving them a forward yield of 0.99%, just under 1%. They go ex-dividend on December 23rd with a pay date on January 9th. Mondelez announced a 10% dividend increase to their quarterly dividend, giving them a 2.29% forward yield, ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 13th. Pfizer's raising their dividend by 2.5%. They're going to have a forward yield of 3.17%, ex-dividend on January 26th, pay date on March 3rd. Abbott Laboratories with a raise of 8.5%, forward yield of 1.9%, ex-dividend on January 12th with a pay date on February 15th. Primaris Real Estate Investment Trust is raising their quarterly dividend by 2.4%. The forward yield is 2.35%. They go ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 16th. Laurentian Bank of Canada is raising their dividend by 2.2%. They've got a forward yield of 4.31%. They go ex-dividend on December 30th with a pay date on February 1st. Crescent Point Energy is raising their dividend by 25%. They've got a forward yield of 4.43%. They're going to go ex-dividend on March 14th with a pay date on April 3rd. TE Connectivity is raising their dividend by 5.4%. The forward yield will be 1.93%, but this isn't going to start until April of 2023 and will follow for the next 4 quarters. Not only is WM hiking their dividend by 7.7%, but the company also announced a common share repurchase program of up to $1.5 billion. The hiked dividend is going to represent an annual yield of 1.69%. Number 10 on the list is Utz brand, and makers of fantastic potato chips, according to my mama. They're raising their dividend by 5.6%, giving them a forward yield of 1.24%. They're going to go ex-dividend on December 16th with a pay date on January 5th. Braemar Hotels and Resorts are increasing their dividend by 400%, giving them a 5.8% forward yield. They've also announced that the board of directors has authorized a stock repurchase program of up to $25 million. Edison is raising their quarterly dividend by 5.4%, giving them a forward yield of 4.51%. They're going to go ex-dividend coming up on December 29th with a pay date on January 31st. Ecolab is raising their dividend by 3.9%, giving them a forward yield of 1.42%. They've got an ex-dividend date coming up on December 19th with a pay date on January 17th. Bristol-Myers Squibb Company raising their dividend by 5.6%, giving them a forward yield of 2.85%. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 5th with a pay date on February 1st. Broadcom is raising their dividend by 12.2%. I can't tell you guys how much I would love to own shares with Broadcom. Ticker symbol is AVGO. They've announced a 12.2% increase, giving them a forward yield of 3.46%. And the company is also going to resume their authorized share repurchase program for the remaining $13 billion. They're going to go ex-dividend on December 19th with a pay date on December 30th. Axis Capital Holdings is raising their quarterly dividend by 2.3%, giving them a forward yield of 3.06%. They're going to go ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 18th. Independent Bank is raising their dividend by 7.8%. They'll have a forward yield of 2.51%, going ex-dividend on December 23rd with a payout on January 6th. Zoetis is raising their dividend by 15.4%, which is pretty impressive. The forward yield is only 0.98%. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 19th with a pay date on March 1st. Ramaco is raising their dividend by 10.3%, giving them a forward yield of 4.55%. They'll go ex-dividend on February 28th with a pay date on March 15th. American Tower is raising their dividend by 6.1%. They'll have a forward yield of 2.96%, going ex-dividend on December 27th with a pay date on February 2nd. CubeSmart announced a 14% dividend increase, giving them a forward yield of 4.66%. They go ex-dividend on December 30th with a pay date on January 17th. Our 22nd company is Erie Indemnity, and they're raising their dividend by 7.2%. This gives them a forward yield of 1.76%. They'll go ex-dividend on January 4th with a pay date on January 20th. Carrier Global is raising their dividend by 23%, which is super impressive, giving them a forward yield of 1.72%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 21st with a pay date on February 10th. Coca-Cola Consolidated is doubling their quarterly dividend up to 50 cents a share. They've also authorized a special dividend of $3 a share. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 26th with a pay date on February 10th, giving them a forward yield of 0.42%. Presidio Property Trust is raising their dividend by 5%, giving them a forward yield, which is pretty hefty, at 7.72%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 16th with a pay date on December 30th. Stryker has announced a 7.9% increase in their dividend, giving them a forward yield of 1.27%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 31st. Indus Realty Trust is raising their quarterly dividend by 12.5%, giving them a forward yield of 1.13%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 17th. And we're getting there, everyone. Balcom is the 27th company in the last week to announce a raise in their dividend, and they are raising it by 10.9%, giving them a forward yield of 0.55%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 23rd with a pay date on January 20th. Not only did MasterCard announce a raise in their dividend by 16.3%, but they also announced a $9 billion stock buyback program. Their forward yield will be 0.66%. They're going to have an ex-dividend date of January 6th with a pay date on February 9th. Our 30th company this week to announce a dividend increase is Hooker Furnishings, and they're raising their dividend by 10%. The forward yield will be 5.19%. They go ex-dividend on December 15th, coming up quickly, and payable on December 30th. Matador Resources has announced a dividend increase by 50%, giving them a forward yield of 0.98%. Something to note is that the board is looking to implement this raised dividend with its next quarterly dividend, which is expected during the first quarter of 2023. Olympia Financial Group is raising their dividend by 29.6%, giving them a forward yield of 6.04%. They go ex-dividend on December 16th with a pay date on December 30th. SEI Investments is raising their dividend by 7.5%, giving them a forward yield of 1.36%. They go ex-dividend on December 16th with a pay date on January 5th. Alexandria Real Estate Equities is raising their dividend by 2.5%, bringing their forward yield up to 3.16%. They'll go ex-dividend on December 29th with a pay date on January 13th. Last on our list of increases is ABM Industries, and they're increasing their dividend by 12.8%, giving them a forward yield of 1.9%. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 4th with a pay date on February 6th. Southwest Airlines just announced a reinstatement of their quarterly dividend. They haven't paid a dividend since March of 2020, so this is good news, right? They've got a forward yield of 1.81%. They're going to go ex-dividend on January 9th, and they're going to have a pay date of January 31st. Another important thing to be aware of as dividend investors is when companies are actually cutting their dividend. And in the last week, we have 4 companies that have done that. And the first is Banco de Brazil, and they've cut their dividend by 53.6%. Next up is a cut from Douglas Emmett, and they're decreasing their dividend by 32%. However, they did announce a $300 million buyback. The third dividend cut comes from PennyMac Mortgage Investment Trust, and they've cut their dividend by 14.9%. And finally, we have SL Green Realty, and they're cutting their dividend by 12.9%. They still have a forward yield of 8%, however, but definitely something to dig in a little bit deeper when we start to see these companies that are cutting their dividends. So we've got 37 increases, 1 reinstatement of a dividend, and 4 companies that have decreased their dividends. But please do your due diligence and research these companies thoroughly before you invest or change any of your investment strategies. Now, if you're at all curious as to what I'm invested in, I just did a portfolio update, so take a peek at that video next.